Alrighty. Well, hello everyone. My name is JD Conroy. I'm a tour director with American Classic Tours. Welcome to our 2023 virtual travel showcase. And folks, I have to admit that I'm very excited to be hosting this live virtual showcase. We have to start by saying we picked a great day here, right? I woke up, I checked my weather app, I saw that it was 0 degrees, wind chill outside this morning. There's snow on the ground. So it's a perfect time for you at your home to make yourself a nice cup of coffee, relax in the comfort of your own home, and start dreaming of some of the places we plan to escape to this year. And really, when you sit back and you think about it, it's amazing that you don't have to go outside of your home. You don't have to drive through the snow. We can connect through technology on Zoom. It's an awesome tool. So the title of my presentation today is called The 7 Classic Destinations Everyone Should See. We'll be traveling from sea to shining sea to see 7 of our most popular destinations. Now, I want to mention that we offer 50 destinations every year. So today I'm just going to be highlighting 7. But we've got a catalog. Basically, anywhere you could think you'd want to go in North America, we've got a tour going there in 2023. And if you sign up for any of these tours, any of our tours in our book, by February 1st, we're offering a special showcase discount. You receive $100 off per person per tour on air tours, $50 off per person per tour for motor coach tours. However, if you sign up today, we'll double that offer. You'll get $200 off per person per tour for air tours and $100 off per person per tour for motor coach tours. So a motor coach tour is any tour where we originate out of Chicago and we just take a motor coach from Chicago, and air tours any of our longer tours where we fly to the destination. So folks, I wanted to say that the phone lines are open if you want to make a reservation at any point, or if while I'm talking on this presentation, you want to ask one of our team members here a question about one of our tours, feel free to call at any time. Our number is 847-548-3333. Okay, so before I get into the destinations today, I want to tell you a little bit about American Classic Tours. This should just take about 5 minutes here, and this will be really important for those of you who have never traveled with us. I know many of you on this Zoom call have probably traveled with us before, but this is very important for those of you who have not. So American Classic Tours was founded in 1988 by that guy in that picture right there next to me. His name's Joe Conroy. My name's JD Conroy. So you could probably put 2 and 2 together here. We're a father and son family-owned business based out of Grayslake, Illinois. And what we've done for the last 35 years now is we've led thousands of travelers on our all-inclusive guided tours to the most beautiful places in North America. And the word I want to start with here, what I first want to unpack is that word all-inclusive. You hear this a lot in the travel industry, but what exactly does it mean to us? When you travel with American Classic Tours, your tour begins with a free home pickup right at your front door. Your limousine driver will bring you to O'Hare, where you'll be met curbside by an American Classic Tours staff member. That there is Kirsten. She's on the phone with your limo driver, waiting to meet you at the curb. She'll lead you inside, where you'll meet your tour director and the rest of your group at a private group airline check-in. Along the way, everything is included. Your airfare, you and the tour director and the group will fly to the destination. All the attractions in your tour, all attractions, entertainment, and admissions are included upfront in the price of your tour. So anything that you see in the catalog that's listed that has an admission fee is included upfront. At American Classic Tours, we don't do any optional excursions or add-ons or anything like that. What you see is what you get. And with our attractions, we want to give you a comprehensive view of the destination you're visiting. We want you to take in history, nature, culture, wildlife, entertainment, scenic overlooks, and we'll be seeing all of this through the comfort of our motor coach, okay, which features big windows, legroom, air conditioning, and restrooms on board. Now on your journey, you'll be joined by an American Classic Tour Director, and it's your tour director's job to make sure the entire tour runs smoothly, to attend to any special needs you might have. And I'm not just saying this because I'm one of them, but I gotta say we have the best team of tour directors in the industry. Along with your tour director, we'll be joined by premier local guides throughout our tours. Sometimes for an afternoon city tour. Sometimes we'll have a local guide who's with us for 3 days while we're touring a national park. And I always tell people the combination of that local guide and your tour director kind of brings the trip to life. A mark of an American Classic tour is high quality hotel accommodations, okay? If we're staying, to give you an idea of the type of hotel we stay at, if we're staying at a national chain, we stay at a lot of Marriott's, Westins, and hotels of comparable quality. However, when we can, we like to stay at what I call experiential hotels, hotels that are attractions in and of themselves. When we go to New Orleans, we stay at the elegant Hotel Monteleone in the heart of New Orleans' French Quarter for all 4 nights of our tour. When we go up to Mackinac Island, we stay at the Grand Hotel for 3 nights. When we go to French Canada, we stay at the famous Chateau Frontenac, that building pictured there. On our tours, we also feature fine dining. Most meals are included in the price of your tour. All the breakfasts are included, most dinners and some lunches here or there. And we like to give you a chance to try some authentic cuisine, some food that is, characteristic of the place that you're visiting. Luggage handling is also included in the price of your tour. All tips are included up front, and this is important to note. We include all tips. Most companies don't do this, even for your tour director and your motor coach driver. So they're all included up front. And the reason we do that, folks, is the last thing we want you to be doing while you're driving past the beautiful Grand Tetons, or you're listening to a fascinating guided tour of Boston's Freedom Trail. The last thing we want you focused on is looking down in your wallet trying to find some cash, rather than immersing yourself in the destination you're visiting. So in short, we include more, and what we include is of the absolute highest quality. But you don't have to take my word for it. I'd encourage you to go online, research us on Facebook. We've got plenty of Facebook reviews, Google reviews, and see what people are saying about us. And what I'll do here is I'll leave you with a review here just for about 30 seconds. This is an example of one of the Google reviews you'll find. So just take a second to read that over. Okay, so enough with the intro. Let's get moving to our 7 destinations. Actually, wait, sorry, one more thing before we get to our 7 destinations. I want to let you know that most of our tours for 2023 are already almost sold out. So it's hard to believe. We're trying, our ops team is working to add more dates, which sometimes can be challenging. A lot of them are already sold out. So if you're interested in traveling with us this year, make sure you call today. There's a lot of other people on this webinar. People are already calling. I hear our phones ringing. So make sure you call in to get your spot reserved before they run out. Okay, let's move on to our destination. So the first tour I want to talk about today is our Southwest National Parks. And we've got 3 dates for this tour this year. And the reason I'm starting my presentation with this tour is, well, it's my favorite American Classic tour. This is an old photo of me. You can see me soaking up the sun at Bryce Canyon National Park. And I just love this tour because it features 5 national parks in just 9 days. And it features a number of unforgettable scenic drives across the great expanse of the American West. Now let's take a look at our day-by-day itinerary. We'll fly into Salt Lake City to begin our tour. We'll take a guided tour of the city where we'll learn its fascinating history with Brigham Young leading the Mormons on the Great Migration to settle in Salt Lake City. We'll learn all about this history as we tour Mormon Temple Square. We'll admire the amazing architecture of the Mormon Temple, and we'll go inside the Mormon Tabernacle, home to the world-famous Mormon Tabernacle Choir, to hear the building's world-class acoustics. Next, we'll take a guided tour of Utah State Capitol Building before we embark on our first scenic drive to the little town of Moab. Now, Moab sits in some prime real estate, right in between 2 amazing national parks, Arches National Park and Canyonlands National Park. And when we stay in Moab, we'll be checking into the Red Cliff Lodge. Now, just a moment ago, folks, you heard me talking about experiential lodging. Well, the Red Cliff Lodge, this is a great example of what experiential lodging looks like. I mean, look at it right there, sitting on the bend of the Colorado River, Amidst these towering red cliffs, the lodge is home to a horse ranch, and the Moab Museum of Film and Western Heritage is actually on the grounds of the museum. And that's because this area is famous for many of those John Wayne movies, the great Westerns. A lot of them were shot in the Moab area. Next, we'll go to Arches National Park. It's named Arches National Park because it's home to over 2,000 natural sandstone arches. If you've ever seen a movie that is set on Mars, it was probably shot here in Arches National Park because the park is home to this incredible otherworldly landscape. In the afternoon, we'll go right next door to Canyonlands National Park. And if Arches is named for its sandstone arches, Canyonlands is named for its canyons. Canyonlands is home to these sweeping views of endless canyons. We'll return that night to the Red Cliff Lodge for a local tradition, a cowboy steak cookout, which we'll enjoy right here overlooking that bend in the Colorado River. We'll leave the Moab area. We'll take in an unforgettable scenic drive to Monument Valley, which is perhaps the most iconic scene of the American West. Now, Monument Valley sits right here on the border of southern Utah and northern Arizona in the heart of Navajo Nation. And when we're in Monument Valley, we'll learn all about the history of the Navajo. And you'll stand right here, folks, and on your iPhone or your camera, you'll get your own version of this photo. Again, those three iconic mitten buttes here, which are called Monument Valley. From there, we'll travel to Lake Powell National Recreation Area. Lake Powell is actually a man-made lake. In the 1960s, it was dammed up by the Glen Canyon Dam. We'll learn all about this on a little tour of the Glen Canyon Dam, and we'll also take a sunset cruise on Lake Powell. It's just a beautiful lake. I love the contrast of the bright blue water and the red rock walls. Take another scenic drive across the Navajo Bridge along the Vermilion Cliffs, those cliffs that you see here in this photo right here. Those are the Vermilion Cliffs. They cut through Arizona and Utah, and again, they're just gorgeous. We'll arrive at the Grand Canyon in absolute wonder. I'm sure many of you have been to the Grand Canyon, but for those of you who have not, you definitely have to see it. It's just incredible. I always say it's mind-bending. You look at it, your senses try to, grasp it or wrap your head around it, and you just can't. It's too big. It's too vast. We go from the Grand Canyon, that vast, mind-bending expanse, to, I always say, the small, intimate amphitheaters of Bryce Canyon National Park. Now, Bryce Canyon is known for its hoodoos. This pictured here, that rock formation, that's called a hoodoo. It's a unique pinnacle-shaped rock formation, and the hoodoos sit in Bryce's many canyons, or they call them amphitheaters, which you'll see here. And I always tell people, going from the Grand Canyon, that big view, to these small canyons that you can walk through, you can reach out and literally touch these hoodoos. It's, again, another nice contrast. Next, we'll journey to our fifth and last national park. This is my personal favorite on the tour, Zion National Park. The reason I love Zion so much is the Virgin River cuts through the bottom of Zion Canyon. And along the Virgin River, there's some bright, lush green vegetation that at times almost looks even like tropical. And again, that contrast to that bright green vegetation and the red rock is really stunning. We'll end our tour in Las Vegas, where we'll check in for a one-night stay at the Bellagio Casino and Resort. You'll have a free night to explore the Strip, see a show, gamble, or just enjoy the comforts of your resort. So, folks, there you have it. That's our Southwest National Parks tour. Coming up, we've got 3 dates, 1 in May and 2 in September. Okay, next up, we have our Canadian Rockies. Now, this is one of our most popular tours. We've, again, got 3 dates on this one. All 3 are almost sold out. And I got to say, I know I just said the Southwest National Parks is my favorite tour, and it is my favorite tour. It runs, perfectly, and it's got a great variety. But this tour, the Canadian Rockies, is by far, in my opinion, the most beautiful place in North America. It's definitely the most beautiful place I've ever been. Okay, if we look at a map here of our journey, we'll fly into Calgary, and those green lines here, represent, right here, represent kind of a traditional style of touring by motor coach. This is the first 5 days of our tour. We'll take in Banff and Jasper National Park. Then on day 6, we'll wake up in Jasper, and this blue line represents a full day's train ride on Rocky Mountaineers train. We'll stop and stay the night in Kamloops. And then this blue line represents day 7, a full another day on Rocky Mountaineers luxurious train before we end our tour in Vancouver and Victoria. Okay, so we'll fly into Calgary and we'll journey to the enchanting mountain town of Banff, where we'll enjoy a 2-night stay at the lovely Moose Hotel and Suites right here on Main Street. I mean, come on, folks, look at that. Look at that huge mountain right on Main Street. You'll have free time to explore Banff's boutique shops, delicious restaurants, and cozy coffee shops. We'll take a guided tour of Banff National Park. We'll see Moraine Lake in the Valley of the 10 Peaks, the beautiful Emerald Lake. We'll take a ride to the top of Sulphur Mountain aboard the Banff Gondola. We'll explore Johnston Canyon. We'll visit the famous Fairmont Lake Louise, where we'll enjoy a gourmet lunch overlooking the lake, and of course you'll have time to walk along Lake Louise as well. So that concludes the Banff portion. So we've done Calgary, Banff, and Lake Louise. Then we're going to make a long trip up to Jasper for our next few nights. And on our way to Jasper, we're going to stop at a really neat attraction, the Columbia Ice Field. We'll hop aboard the Snow Coach Ice Explorer to ride atop the Columbia Glacier. We'll be able to get out, walk along the glacier. It's a really neat experience. From there, we'll go to the Glacier Skywalk Observatory for some awesome views. We'll stop at the Athabasca Falls, where you'll be standing, again, folks, you'll be standing right here. You'll get your own version of this photo. And folks, it actually looks like this. It is stunning. We'll see Bow Lake before arriving at Jasper National Park. Now, I know there's probably some of you watching who are like, all right, JD, these are some beautiful pictures, but have you ever heard of a thing called Photoshop? And yes, I have heard of Photoshop. I know that photos can be edited, but folks, these places actually look like this. The lakes actually pop fluorescent blues, greens, and turquoises, and that's because of the recent erosion of the stone off these mountainsides. The sediment has fallen into these lakes, and when the light hits the water, the sediment sitting there in the water, that sediment makes the water glow. We'll take a boat cruise on Lake Moline, which is home to one of the world's most photogenic spots, Spirit Island, okay? And I can say it's one of the world's most photogenic spots because the last time I was there, my local guide told me this story. And he said, I think it was in the 1980s, Kodak and Time magazine did like this joint promotion where they had this contest, the top photo in the world. And so Time magazine had like 100,000 submissions or something crazy from photos all across the world. And a guy who lived out here near Jasper National Park, he actually didn't even have that nice of a camera, but he hiked all the way out here to Lake Moline, took this photo, sent it into Time. Time picked this spot here of all the photos they received as the best photograph in the world. So yeah, I think you could say it's the world's most photogenic spot. Now I have to say, I've never seen more wildlife. I've been to Yellowstone, I've been to Yosemite, I've been to most of our country's national parks. I've never seen more wildlife than I've seen at Jasper National Park. I took this video the last time I was at Jasper. Pretty cool. Maybe I should submit this to Time magazine or National Geographic or something. This elk here was literally 5 feet from our motor coach. You'll see here in a second. Yep, see him walking across the motor coach. And now, oh, here we get to the good part of the video. He's up there, he's searching for his girlfriends there. So you'll see a lot of wildlife on this tour. I've also seen bears, moose, bighorn sheep, and even a few years ago, I saw a lynx, which is extremely rare. Now, folks, I can't promise that you'll see any of these animals, in particular, but what I can promise you is that you will see wildlife here in Jasper National Park. Okay, so that concludes the 5-day first portion of our tour. We will wake up on day 6 in Jasper and we will board the Rocky Mountaineer. Again, the luxurious some would say the best train ride in the entire world. It's definitely the train ride of a lifetime. You'll see the rugged splendor of the Canadian wilderness, all from Rocky Mountaineer's Gold Leaf service. Now, there's two ways to travel with Rocky Mountaineer. One is standard silver service, and then there's the more expensive Gold Leaf service. In our package, we include the Gold Leaf service, and here's why. Gold Leaf service features a bi-level glass dome luxury coach for panoramic viewing. Now, to give you an idea of what this is, rather than to try to explain it, I'll just show you this photo here. I mean, look at that. The whole top of the coach is glass, which allows you to see those white peaked mountaintops. As part of Gold Leaf service, we'll have access to an exclusive outdoor viewing platform where you can step outside, breathe in the fresh, cool, crisp air of Western Canada. Gold Leaf service also features 5-star dining. I mean, come on, look at that food. It's like, I'm not kidding, it's 5-star food on this train. World-class chefs come from around the world to make this food here. I mean, have I not sold you yet? I mean, look at that dessert. So there's multiple meals a day in the dining car, which are like hot gourmet meals, but they also do snacks, morning scones and coffee, afternoon wine and cheese, snacks throughout the day, and complimentary top shelf liquor, wine and beer along the way. And while all of that's great, those are all nice treats, the real treat, the greatest thing about this train ride is the scenery, the remoteness, okay? And I know many of you are probably familiar with, you ask, somebody goes out in nature or they see a beautiful scene and they're, taken aback. They say, it was so beautiful, it's a miracle. You can see God's hand at work or something. And that's definitely true. I mean, being out here, you feel that way. But I also always find myself thinking as I'm sitting on this train ride, taking in the beautiful scenery, I'm like, there's kind of a man-made miracle going on here as well. I mean, how the heck did a bunch of guys 100 years ago get to these places and lay these track lines, along these cliffs, along lakes, along glacial rivers? So it's really neat. The train ride is just amazing. We'll arrive in the striking modern city of Vancouver. On the last day of our tour, we'll take a ferry to the lovely town of Victoria. Victoria is home to the Bouchard Gardens. Now, I'll confess, I'm not much of a gardener myself. I'm not much of a flower guy, but as part of my job as a tour director, I've been to a lot of gardens as part of our tours. And I got to say, of all the gardens I've ever been to, Bouchard Gardens is here. Every other garden is way below. Okay, this is by far the prettiest garden I've ever been to. Okay, so folks, there you have it. That is our June 3rd through the 12th, or the September dates, Canadian Rockies dates coming up later this year. Okay, this is the last tour I'm going to preview before we do our little halftime, and then I'll take a look at any questions you might have. I'm going to try to turn on the chat. But feel free to ask any questions. Or at the halftime too, I'll allow you to raise your hand and you can ask a question audibly. Okay, so our last question here is the Washington, D.C. Cherry Blossom Festival. Hang on 1 second. Okay. Seeing the cherry blossoms in bloom in Washington, D.C. is a sight every American should see. It's just magical. We'll be visiting D.C. for the National Cherry Blossom Festival, which features the annual tradition of the National Cherry Blossom Parade. Some other highlights we'll take in on this tour include a guided tour of Washington, D.C., where we'll see the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, the Vietnam War Memorial, the Korean War Memorial, the Supreme Court, Iwo Jima, the Library of Congress, and along with our full-day guided tour of the city, we'll also do a nighttime guided tour. And seeing our nation's capital illuminated at night, some of the memorials are just awesome. My favorite one to see on the nightlight guided tour is the World War II memorial pictured here. We'll also see the Lincoln Memorial, the Capitol Building, and more. Now, this tour also features a nice little cruise on the Potomac River, and we'll cruise to George Washington's home, Mount Vernon. And it's neat to do it this way because when George Washington had guests back in the day, they would arrive typically by boat. So we'll arrive as his guests had arrived. We'll take a tour of Arlington National Cemetery, which is, again, so beautiful at this time of year with the cherry blossoms. We'll witness the moving changing of the guard ceremony. You'll enjoy an entire free day to explore our nation's great Smithsonian museums, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Air and Space Museum, the Museum of Natural History, and of course, I always have a bunch of ladies on my tour asking, JD, what museum do I see the First Lady's dresses? Well, it's right here at the American History Museum. Now, while all of this stuff is great, my favorite, the history, the monuments, the memorials, my favorite part of this tour is going to Philomena's restaurant. This is my favorite restaurant I've ever been to. It's got a unique story and a wonderful ambiance and tasty food. You'll have to join me on this tour to experience it for yourself. Okay, so that is our Washington, D.C. tour coming up in April. Now, we will break right now for a little intermission. I can see if you want to try to raise your hand, I can try to let you talk on the ask a question so the rest of the group can hear you. If not, we'll just take a little break. Feel free to type in any questions you have in the Q&A. I'll review those during this little intermission, and what we'll do is we'll hop back on here in about 5 minutes. So hang tight, and I'll be right back. Okay, let's get moving here with part number 2. We're going to talk about 4 more tours here. We're going to start with the Pacific Northwest. Now, we got 2 dates for this tour this summer, July 15th through the 23rd and August 12th through the 20th. Now, if you look at a map here, see that red circle that I drew? That is the area of the country we're going to be visiting on this tour. And boy, we cover a lot of ground. I always tell people, what if you took that red circle and moved it across onto the East Coast and the Northeast? We'd see like 10 states, right? So we'll be traveling a lot. We'll be in the motor coach a lot. But on this tour, it's a good thing because we're going to be seeing amazing scenery as we drive down Oregon's coast and California's coast. Now, the first thing that stands out about this tour to me is that more than any other tour we offer, the Pacific Northwest features an amazing combination of dynamic, modern cities and natural beauty. Now, some of our tours, like our Southwest Parks tour, that's predominantly a nature tour, right? And then we've got New York City or Washington, D.C. Those are city tours. Well, the Pacific Northwest has both the cities and the natural beauty. The second thing that really stands out about this tour is that we see so much in just 9 days. I made this, collage slide so that I remember to tell you this tour, it's like by the end of the 9 days, you'll be thinking to yourself, how did I see all of that in such a short amount of time? You'll have a scrapbook that's like 100 pages long. So we'll fly into Seattle. Our first stop will be at Chihuly Garden and Glass. We'll go to the top of the Space Needle, the Space Needle is this building here, and it rotates 360 degrees at the top of the Space Needle for some awesome views of the greater Seattle area. Seattle's amazing. It's like dropping a city. It's like dropping, downtown Chicago in the middle of what feels like the North Woods. There's huge trees everywhere, bodies of water, mountains around in all directions. Next, we'll journey through Washington's rugged forests on our way to Mount St. Helens. And of course, you all remember what happened right here at Mount St. Helens in 1980. Yep, that historic eruption. We'll learn all about that historic moment at the Johnston Ridge Observatory. Next, we'll make our way to our second major American city, the city of Portland. On a guided tour of Portland, we'll see its beautiful rose garden, and we'll also try a local favorite, Portland's famous Voodoo Donuts. People come from all across the country to try these things, so you'll be able to try one of them as well. From there, we'll journey to the Columbia River Gorge, and I think if you polled a group of 100 people randomly and you asked them, what are the most beautiful places to visit in America? I don't think many people would say their first answer would be the Columbia River Gorge. However, in my opinion, it's one of the most beautiful places in the entire country. I love it's got this big green river bluffs and these awesome views, like this view of Crown Point pictured here. We'll also see the Multnomah Falls and Mount Hood as we tour the Columbia River Gorge area. So we'll go from that river gorge over to the coast, where we'll enjoy another hidden gem, the Oregon's rocky coastline. Everyone talks about the California coast, which is beautiful. We'll be seeing the California coast on this tour, but the Oregon coast is, again, just stunning. It's home to these beaches. You'll see we'll be driving along views like this for hours. It's breathtaking. We'll see the Yaquina Head Lighthouse, the Heceta Lighthouse, the coastal town of Newport, Oregon. We'll visit the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area, where we'll take an unforgettable dune buggy ride. Now, I'm sure many of you have been to the Indiana or Michigan dunes. Well, these Oregon dunes, take those, the Indiana or Michigan dunes, take them times 20, and you have the Oregon dunes. They're just spectacular. We'll take a cruise on the Rogue River, and then we'll continue our journey southward into California, where we'll experience California's Redwood Coast. Now, as a tour director, I've led about 75 tours since I started 7 years ago here at American Classic Tours. And my favorite thing about being a tour director is being able to manage expectations. And what do I mean by this? Well, as a tour director, you often find yourself in the situation where you're leading a group of people to a place they've never been before, but you've been there. So you get to help prepare them emotionally to see what they're about to see. And it's really cool. Sometimes you take a group of people to an attraction, and they come back on the motor coach and they're just in awe. You can just see the joy in their face, right? And I've never seen more awe from a group of people getting back on my motor coach than I saw the last time I was at the Redwoods. People walk through the Redwoods. I'm telling you, it's like a transcendental, it's almost like a religious sort of experience. The trees are so big, you feel so small. It's just something everyone should see. We'll see these redwoods at Humboldt State Park, Founders Grove, and the Avenue of the Giants. Next, we'll continue our journey southward to the Sonoma Valley, the birthplace of the robust California wine industry. We'll tour a Sonoma Valley winery to learn how they cultivate their grapes. And of course, we'll do a wine tasting. Then that evening, probably at around sunset, I include this specific photo for a reason. We'll be coming from the north right here, and we'll drive across the Golden Gate Bridge with the view of the Bay Bridge and the San Francisco skyline to our left, the vast Pacific Ocean off to our right. It's a really memorable moment. On a guided tour of San Francisco, we'll see its trolley cars, the crazy curvy Lombard Street, the old Nob Hill neighborhood, the Painted Ladies, Chinatown, and of course, the Golden Gate Bridge. So there you have it, folks. That's our Pacific Northwest tour. Again, think of all the things that we saw. We saw, big cities, waterfalls, mountains and volcanoes, river gorge, beautiful coastline, sand dunes, wineries. We really see it all on this tour. Next up, we've got a perfect fall foliage getaway, our Autumn in the Adirondacks tour. Now, when I think of this tour and what makes it special, a few things come to mind. The first is beautiful mountain ranges. Second is scenic drives on remote country roads. Of course, colorful fall foliage comes to mind. I think of the history of old New York, its high society and the mansions along the Hudson River Valley. I think of FDR and his Hyde Park mansion, which is featured on this tour. And lastly, I remember that this tour ends with a big bang, okay? The pacing of this tour is really unique. The first 6 days we're out in the mountains in these small towns in upstate New York, and then we come into downtown New York City, and it's like a big bang, right? And you go from the small, slow pace to the fast-paced New York City. It's a really neat way to end the tour. Okay, if we look at our map here, we will be flying into New York City, and we will go right away all the way up to Albany, okay? We'll stay for one night in Albany, and then we'll make our way up to, this is the Adirondacks portion of this tour. Lake Placid, Saratoga Springs, Lake George. And then, so that's going to be the first few days of the tour is up here. Then we'll come down to the Poughkeepsie area for like the second part of our tour, and we'll hub and spoke to Hyde Park and West Point out of Poughkeepsie. And then for our last couple days, we'll journey down to New York City, where we'll take in the Big Apple. Okay, so we'll fly into New York City. We'll drive to Albany, New York State Capitol. We'll take a guided tour of Albany to hear about its rich history. And we'll see its state capitol building, which in my opinion is one of the prettiest buildings in the country. Next, we'll journey to Saratoga Springs. This lovely town became well known for its mineral springs and baths. Horse racing, it's a hub for thoroughbred horse racing, and it's home to the Saratoga Race Course. It was the site of the Battle of Saratoga, a turning point in the Revolutionary War. We'll learn about all of these things on a guided tour of Saratoga Springs. And you also have free time to stroll through the charming downtown of Saratoga Springs, which kind of reminded me, it's like a New York version of Galena, for example. Next, we'll journey to Lake Placid. Again, just so spectacular at this time of year. Lake Placid, of course, was home to the Winter Olympics in 1980. It was here that the miracle on ice happened. We'll tour the Olympic sites. We'll learn how the athletes train and how Lake Placid ran their Winter Games. You'll have free time to relax, sit by the lake on the Adirondack chairs. You'll be able to explore Lake Placid's charming downtown. We'll take a boat cruise on Lake Placid to see what they call the camps, the beautiful homes that sit along the lake. We'll journey on another, scenic ride to Whiteface Mountain. Okay, we'll stand atop the mountain for some awesome views of the surrounding fall foliage. Then we'll visit Lake George, an absolute gem in upstate New York. And when I was in Lake George, I found this quote about Lake George, which was I thought was really neat. Thomas Jefferson wrote this in his personal diary. Apparently, he was a big fan of Lake George. He said, "Lake George is without comparison the most beautiful water I ever saw, formed by a contour of mountains into a basin, finally interspersed with islands, its water limpid as crystal, and the mountainsides covered with rich groves. Down to the water's edge, here and there, precipices of rock to checker the scene and save it from monotony." So that is Thomas Jefferson. And he's right. It's a beautiful lake. We'll take a cruise on the Lake George steamboat. Okay, so that concludes part one of our tour, the Adirondacks portion. Then we'll come down to the Poughkeepsie area, and we'll visit West Point. Again, really neat history. It's a beautiful campus, and it's a premier attraction. It's really neat to learn what life as a cadet is like. Now, when I was there last, I learned the story of the Hudson River chains, and you'll have to forgive me here. The last portion of this tour is going to be heavy on history. I was a history major in college. I'm a big fan of history, and the story of the Hudson River chains here was the British during the Revolutionary War. There was a plan for that. The Americans were anticipating that their ships were going to sail down the Hudson River right here, and the Americans had this plan to put this big chain below the water in the river and tie it to each side of the bank, so that when the British ship came down this river, it would crash into the chain and really stunt the advance. Now, the British ultimately never came down this way due to a traitor, Benedict Arnold, but it's a neat story nonetheless. And they saved this chain, and they have it as a monument at West Point, and it's kind of symbolic when you think a team or a military unit is only as strong as its weakest link, or the whole team has to work together. These are the military virtues that are symbolized by that Hudson River chain. From there, we'll go to the Vanderbilt Mansion, a sign of the Gilded Age. Again, it's a look at that historic high society of old New York. Right across the street from the Vanderbilt Mansion is another mansion, the FDR Mansion, okay? And this is where he lived his entire life. It's where his presidential library is located. And it's so neat being here. You learn about FDR, and you learn about the things that happened at this location. They say on this lawn, or in this room here, it was there that FDR and Winston Churchill basically made some decisions that would affect the entire world, that would affect history in World War II. We'll visit the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park. This is a really neat attraction. A lot of world-class chefs, everyone from Anthony Bourdain to, you think of a famous chef, they've probably trained here at the Culinary Institute of America. So we'll learn all about the campus and how they train these young chefs. We'll also have a chance to enjoy the delicious 5-star, 5-course meal these students make for us. Then we'll enjoy some pretty travel along the Hudson River Valley before we arrive for our last 2 days in New York City, okay? And in New York, we'll take in one Broadway show. We'll take a tour of New York City, which will feature a visit to the 9/11 Memorial. So there you have it, folks. That is our Autumn in the Adirondacks tour coming up in October. Okay, next up, we have New Orleans. All right, this tour is almost sold out. It's coming up here in April. And when you think of New Orleans, what first comes to mind? Now, take a second and think, what is it about New Orleans? What do I think of? Maybe you've been there, maybe you haven't. Well, maybe you think of Mardi Gras, or maybe you think of jazz music, or maybe you think of the crazy partying you did on Bourbon Street back in your 20s, okay? While all of these things, you know, are important symbols and they're really interesting parts of New Orleans, I think New Orleans is more than just these symbols, okay? It, in my opinion, is America's most unique cultural city. And I'll tell you, we'll do a little historical deep dive, which will explain why I think that. So first off, New Orleans sits in a very interesting geographical position, an important strategic and economic hub right at the mouth of the Mississippi River. And it's because of this strategic location that a lot of the world powers back in the 17 and 1800s fought over this area, okay? It was first settled by the French. The city was formally founded as New Orleans in 1718, and the French inhabited the city until the Treaty of Paris in 1763, when the French gave New Orleans over to the Spanish, who ruled New Orleans from 1763 until they gave it back to the French in 1800, and then eventually the French gave it over to America in what it was known as the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, right? What a great deal for America. Thomas Jefferson bought it from Napoleon for, you know, pennies on the dollar. So all of this passing of hands has, you know, has made New Orleans a unique sort of melting pot, along with the French, the Spanish, the Americans. The British were also in and out of this area. The slave trade brought African culture into New Orleans. There was a real exchange of ideas and goods and everything from kind of the Caribbean culture, which has its own unique culture. New Orleans sitting is kind of that entry point to America from the Caribbean. And also a fun little fact here is, as part of the Treaty of Paris in 1763, the French gave New Orleans over to the Spanish, and you know, And what happened is a lot of as the French ceded certain areas, there was an area up in Nova Scotia called Acadia, right? And the French, as part of this Treaty of Paris, gave Acadia over to the English, okay? And what happened is the English came into Acadia and Nova Scotia, where these French settlers had been living, and they said, you have to become, you know, Protestant, and you have to, you know, follow the rule of law of the British government. Well, these Acadians didn't really like this, so they left to try to find the closest area to settle that would be French friendly, and they walked all the way down from Acadia, Nova Scotia, all the way down to New Orleans, and this became known as the Great Emigration. And the reason I'm bringing all of this up is that Acadia morphed into the word Cajun. That's where Cajun comes from. Cajun food, Cajun. It was the Acadians who had their own unique culture up in Nova Scotia brought it down. So all of this, the French, the Caribbean, the African, the American, the Acadian, Spanish, you name it, all of these cultures in New Orleans, unlike any other place in the country, they for years were kind of brewing together, forming this melting pot, which is now literally represented in New Orleans' unique melting pot foods like jambalaya and the sort. So it's really neat to see that historical reflection live on through the Cajun food, through the architecture. Now, this is the French Quarter here in New Orleans. That looks, I've been to Paris myself, that looks like something you'd see in Paris, right? The French Quarter is also filled with these Spanish balconies. The Spanish influenced style of architecture is still alive in New Orleans. And you even get some of this Caribbean sort of influence. You know, you think of the Caribbean with that Dutch influence, having the bright colored architecture. Well, some of that was carried over here to New Orleans. Okay, so let's take a look at a day-by-day itinerary. We'll take a guided tour of New Orleans. We'll see Jackson Square, St. Louis Cathedral pictured here, see the above ground cemeteries, the mansions in the Garden District. We'll take a carriage tour of the French Quarter. We'll try some coffees and beignets at the Café du Monde. We'll take a swamp tour where we'll learn about the unique ecology, and we'll see some alligators. We'll take a cruise on the Mississippi River on the SS Natchez, which will feature some live jazz entertainment. We'll visit Mardi Gras World, this really neat attraction that kind of displays floats from past Mardi Gras parades. We'll go to the New Orleans School of Cooking, where we'll learn all about how Cajun food is made. We'll visit the Hoosma House, a really neat old plantation, and we'll visit the National World War II Museum, which of all places is actually located in New Orleans. And part of the reason they did it was because New Orleans was an important Navy port during World War II. This is just an awesome museum. I mean, I'm a big World War II fan, well, buff, I should say. But even if you're not, it's a great museum. Now, a nice feature of this tour is that we stay all 4 nights at the luxurious Hotel Monteleone, which sits right here in the heart of the French Quarter. Got this luxurious sort of feel, charming decor, and it's home to the Carousel Bar, okay? This is a unique bar that you'll have to visit when you visit New Orleans. And I include this, see here, the decorations on the bar. This encapsulates, this is New Orleans. Where else in the country would you see something like this? Well, you'll see it here in New Orleans. So that is our tour coming up this April. All right, our last tour I'm going to be previewing today, I call it American Heritage. It's coming up in April. Now, folks, if you love American history, this is the perfect tour for you. I would say that more than any other tour, this tour here packs more of a historical punch than any other one we offer. It's also got a unique itinerary, okay? We'll fly into Washington, D.C. We'll journey from Washington, D.C. up to Baltimore, where we'll see Fort McHenry. We'll stay a few nights in the Annapolis area. Then we'll journey down the Del Mar Peninsula all the way down to Virginia Beach, where we'll take in the Virginia International Tattoo. We'll head west to the historic triangle of Virginia, which is Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. We'll head west to Monticello and the Skyland Resort in Shenandoah National Park before we return to Washington, D.C., where we'll stay for the last few days of our tour. Okay, so our first stop will be at Fort McHenry, a national monument and historic shrine. Does anyone know what Fort McHenry was famous for? You're probably saying to yourself, I hope there's at least one of you who's saying, it was the birthplace of the Star-Spangled Banner. So it was during a battle of the War of 1812. The British were bombarding. They were out in the water here in the bay, bombarding the Americans who were in this fort with cannonballs. And the Americans, you know, amidst being bombarded, raised the American flag. And there was a young lawyer at the time. He wasn't fighting in the war, but he was sitting up on a bluff in Baltimore watching this fort get bombarded. And he saw that flag go up. And he was so inspired by the sight that he wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. We'll visit Annapolis, which is my favorite small city in the country. Annapolis just oozes with historical charm. It's marked by its colonial architecture and its cobblestone streets. In Annapolis, we'll take a guided tour of the U.S. Naval Academy to learn what life as a midshipman is like. We'll take a cruise on the Chesapeake Bay. The Chesapeake Bay is home to these lighthouses. These are called screw pile lighthouses. There's dozens of these that sit out in the Chesapeake Bay. And I find them to be, I don't know, strangely photogenic. Next, we'll journey down the Delmar Peninsula. It's called Delmar because it's half Delaware, half Maryland. So you get Delmar, okay, the Delmar Peninsula. And we'll drive down to Virginia Beach, where we'll take in the Virginia International Military Tattoo. Now, I'm sure many of you have never heard of this. A lot of you are probably a little confused. You're like, JD, you're taking us to a tattoo festival? Like, I don't want tattoos. No, it has nothing to do with the tattoos that you put on your skin. Tattoo is a Dutch-derived word that's come to mean like military bands, military concerts, like kind of a military, concert. So bands, dancers, drill teams from across the world, from like 20 plus countries, come to Virginia Beach to this basketball stadium, and they put on this incredible performance. And it's a hidden gem. A lot of people have heard of the world's largest military tattoo, the one in Edinburgh, Scotland. This is the second largest in the world. And I'll never forget, first time I led this tour, I had a guy who was traveling with me, and he had been on like 30 or 40 tours. He was a long-time traveler with us. And he pulled me aside after the Virginia tattoo, and he said, you know, JD, I've been all over the country with you guys, but I got to say, this is like my favorite attraction I've ever been to. So it's really something else. From there, we'll head west or northwest to the historic Triangle of Virginia, Williamsburg. We'll stay for 2 nights in Williamsburg. Colonial Williamsburg's really neat. It's kind of like half the people there have forgot that we're living in 2023. They're dressed up like it's the late 1700s. That's because it's the world's largest living history museum. Neat attraction. We'll visit the Jamestown settlement. Jamestown was that first English settlement in America. Everyone always thinks of the Pilgrims up in Massachusetts, but they got here in 1619. The Virginia Company got here in 1607. And of course, Jamestown is where Captain John Smith and Pocahontas met. They fell in love, you know, and inspired the Disney movie Pocahontas. The third part of the historic Virginia Triangle is Yorktown, which was the site of a turning point in the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Yorktown. From there, we'll head west to Monticello. I just love Monticello. It's maybe my favorite historical attraction in the country. Monticello is Thomas Jefferson's elegant estate, and he named it Monticello because it sits on a little mountain, and Monticello in Italian means little mountain. It's in an awesome area. Now, if you're asking me, I think Thomas Jefferson's the most interesting guy in American history. He was there at the Declaration of Independence. He was a president. He had his battles with Alexander Hamilton. But even more than that, he was kind of like America's like Da Vinci figure. When you go to his home, you get this great appreciation for the fact that this guy knew a little bit about everything. I mean, he knew about agriculture. He knew about economics, philosophy, government, architecture, you name it. He was kind of a jack of all trades. From there, we'll hop on the Skyline Drive as we travel up to the very top of Shenandoah National Park. So yes, this tour does feature a national park. We'll stay at the Skyland Resort, which sits at the very highest point of this national park. You'll enjoy some awesome scenery like you see here. Then we'll return to Washington, D.C. for the final portion of our tour. We'll take a guided tour of D.C. again, see the Lincoln Memorial, the Capitol Building, the Jefferson Memorial, and we'll end our tour with a visit to Mount Vernon. And I'm about to end my showcase here, but I just got one little historical tidbit I want to leave you with. So I've been to Mount Vernon now like 7 or 8 times, but the last time I was there, I heard this very interesting little factoid, okay? And I walked in the home and I saw this key hanging on the wall. And I asked the docent who was there, I said, what is this key and what's this doing here? And the docent said, well, I'm glad you asked because this is a very interesting story. And what happened, well, I guess we'll rewind in time here. We'll go back to, has anyone heard of the name Marquis de Lafayette? I'm sure many of you have heard of this name. A lot of cities in America or streets are named Lafayette, and it's named after the Frenchman, Marquis de Lafayette. He was a young French nobleman, and when he heard that there was a revolution starting in America, he was a teenager, but he was inspired. He's like, I want to go fight for freedom with these Americans. So he came across the Atlantic. He started fighting with the American military. He kind of worked his way up the military and started working closely with George Washington. George Washington took a liking to this young guy and kind of took him under his wing. And later Washington said that Lafayette was like the son that he never had, closest thing he ever had to a son, because Washington had no children of his own. Okay, so Lafayette fights in the American Revolution. He gets tight with Washington. A few years later, in 1791, a revolution breaks out in his home country of France, the French Revolution. And I guess Lafayette hadn't had enough revolution, so he went back home to get in the action on that revolution. Now, many of you probably remember from your history books that there was an event that marked the beginning of the French Revolution. It was the storming of the Bastille, when the Bastille was a prison in Paris, and the revolutionaries unlocked the prison, and all the prisoners stormed out of the Bastille, and the bloody French Revolution began. Well, going back to Lafayette, a few years after all the chaos had ended in France after the revolution, Lafayette got his hands on the key to the Bastille. Okay, so this key opened the Bastille, and he thought it was really cool. He brought it back on a later visit when he visited George Washington, and he handed Washington the key, and he said, George, you are the patriarch of liberty. You should hold the key to freedom. When I heard that, I was like, wow. This is why you travel, Sure, you can read books, which I like doing. Sure, you can learn a lot by watching PBS, but getting out there, experiencing, and really immersing yourself in the destinations, it's a great way to learn. It's a great way to broaden your horizons, and to come back just a slightly different person, a little, rejuvenated, a broader perspective, refreshed, and ready to get back to your everyday life. So I leave you with that. I hope you'll be able to join us on a tour here in 2023. Again, you can sign up for any tour that we had in our catalog. And you just got to call in. Our number is 847. Here, I'll pull it up on the screen. See here. Our number is 847-548-3333. That's 847-548-3333. Thank you all for coming out here. I will leave this up on the screen. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, we could try this chat function or the Q&A, or if you want to raise your hand, I'll try to, let you ask a question for the group here. So, anyone have any questions? Okay, no questions. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Yeah, feel free to call us to get that discount today. Again, a lot of our tours are almost sold out. We already have more bookings for this year than we did for all of 2022. So feel free to give us a call. We'll be here. Looking forward to chat with you. Thanks, and have a great 2023. We hope to see you out on the road soon.